Alrighty, AP Hug, 15 minutes of notes. Let's see what we can do here. All right, got a few little topics. We're going to keep rolling our way through some of these city models. All right, kind of tie in with your coloring books. All right, so we finished off with those European models. Taking a look at those when we were together yesterday, and so let's jump on to. We're going to head on down to Africa. All right, and so this is going to be another example of a number of, well, really another model that kind of similar to Latin America, has multiple CBDs. Okay, more than usually one or more, like two central business districts. That's what he's trying to say. Two. Okay, some of them even have three of these. Okay, and there's similarities with Latin America. We talked about the role of colonies and Spain and Portugal. All that. Well, think about what we learned about when we were back in unit 4, and the role of imperialism down in Africa. Okay, all of those different European countries who were claiming colonies on the African continent. And so we're going to have a huge part of that whole aspect of things coming into play with this. Okay. Bottom line, I mean, you're going to get into the influence that imperialism is going to end up having on the development of cities in Africa. Okay. Because typically what you're going to be looking at as far as the history goes is, there were cities when the Europeans started showing up, mainly in the 19th century, there were already big cities in Africa, that had been built up by Africans. And some of them were, they went back to ancient times. I mean, they were very, very old. In some cases, the Europeans built basically their own cities elsewhere. And then in some cases, the Europeans would take that as, oh, hold on, I have a dog revolt. Sorry about that. The dog revolt, for now at least, has been quelled. All right, don't worry, no dogs were harmed. Nothing like that. All right, where was I? Oh, we were talking about African cities. Recent growth rapid growth in recent decades. Yeah, actually, we've talked about some of this before in class, where we've seen a kind of a confluence of a number of reasons why we've seen a lot of rapid urbanization in parts of Africa, and this kind of goes back to a little bit what we touched on even in our last unit. That this is where the men are going to work in factories and manufacturing centers in a lot of these cities, these urban settings, and the women still left to take on a lot of the agricultural duties back at home, that sort of thing. And so we see a lot of that, and a lot of that also comes into play with another topic that we've talked about in class before, and that is kind of the rising amount of foreign investment in different parts of Africa. China, who's been dumping in billions, if not trillions of dollars into Africa, and kind of gaining not only a lot of business opportunity, which provides jobs for African people, but a lot of also kind of different kinds of political influence and that sort of thing. Okay, all right. Let's see, what else do we have here? I should have probably connected this in with number 1, but oh well, here it is. So when we talk about the multiple CBDs in a number of African cities, and we look at this African city model, that's kind of what it boils down to. And so you've got what is going to be coined as the traditional CBD. This is the city as it was built up before any Europeans ever showed up on the scene. Okay, so we're going back to, the dawning of time, and some of the earliest civilizations, come from the African continent. This is where kind of human existence begins, all the way until about the late 18th, early 19th century, when Europeans started to finally push into Africa, looking for natural resources and ways of being able to profit off of a continent that didn't have the technological advantages they had, all that kind of business. Okay, and so that you have those traditional central business districts that go back to those times way in the way back. And then you have what I mentioned already. Once the Europeans show up, if they're British, French, Germans, Belgians, I mean, everyone's going to come pouring in. And they're going to build their own cities, either on top of old traditional ones or completely separate. And it's going to be in those colonial central business districts that you're going to get, a lot of government type buildings, administration, things like that are going to be used to actually, to operate the actual colony itself. And a lot of times those colonial central business districts, are going to be based on European designs. Okay, big wide road kind of boulevards and a little bit more of that European style architecture. That sort of thing. And it's something that you can see evidence of in different parts of Africa to this very day. Imperialism has been gone from Africa now for about 60, 70 years. But a lot of those signs and kind of reminders are there. Okay. All right. A little bit of some terminology coming at you here, all right? Informal economic zones. This is something we see in a lot of these African cities. And to kind of get that a little more clearly defined for you, informal economic zones describes businesses that don't really have permanent employees and follow government regulations. They could be kind of like just little curbside businesses. Maybe you just operate a little stall. It's almost, it's small. It's kind of temporary. It's something you can kind of pack up and move off really quickly somewhere else. Sometimes it's people kind of running into traffic to try to sell things directly to drivers who are in their cars trying to get from one place to another, we want to buy a bouquet of flowers, whatever it may be. Okay. That is what makes up the informal economy. And a lot of these African cities have a zone where a lot of that takes place. Just kind of this temporary kind of fly by night, one day it's there, the next day it's gone, that sort of thing. Periodic markets are kind of getting into, I don't know, think about those farmers markets that we talked about back in our last unit. Okay, small scale merchants who come together, maybe on a weekly basis, maybe on a monthly basis, maybe on a yearly basis to sell their goods. It might be agricultural goods. It could be handcrafted goods, things like that. But those periodic markets are kind of like the idea of, if you've ever gone to like a street market, that kind of thing, a farmer's market. It's kind of going down that road. All right. Let's see what's next. We also have within the African cities that follow along with this model, we do have these areas of manufacturing and residential. Manufacturing, a lot of it is a lot of these newer factories that are popping up in different parts of Africa. And then the residential zones are a little bit different in African cities. There is usually going to be some almost kind of like segregation, people being separated based on their ethnicity. Okay. And in a way, it's a reflection of what you see going on in some of these African countries where they're multicultural. But the people who are there kind of create some divisions amongst themselves. Right? It's nothing that's forced on them. It's more along the lines of what they do on their own. Sorry, that was another interruption. You just didn't know it, but it wasn't the dogs. It was just me. All right, so we're talking about those residential zones and the way that they are configured compared to other places. All right. Let's see. Last one I'm going to cover here with Africa is going to be. That's right, informal settlements, all right? Squatter settlements. So this is going to be close to what we were talking about, the favelas and barrios. I'm trying, folks. I'm trying with these, get these accents in there. But when we looked at those Latin American cities, I think I pretty much kind of spelled it out there with E. But the term squatter settlements, just be familiar with that term squatter. You'll sometimes even hear that. I mean, they talk about even people in the local area here, at least I do down here in Portland, where Homeless people are just like, if someone has a vacant house, maybe it's on that housing market, but no one's living there, they'll kind of force their way in and they squat. In other words, they kind of take up residence and then it's up to the legal system to get them back out. There's not anything like that going on in Africa, all right? Instead, what people here are doing is very similar to what we found in Latin America. They are making shelters out of whatever they can find and then popping them up where they can find the space to do them. And that's that term, informal settlements. Okay, again, it's temporary. It's settlements that, I mean, my goodness, I mean, a strong breeze, wind is gonna knock some of these places down. It's that kind of a thing. Okay, all right, that's Africa. Let's move on a little bit further on, including some of Africa. Actually, when we talk about Islamic cities, some of these are actually contained in Africa because the influence of Islam, while it's obviously kind of at its heart right there in the Middle East, also goes into Indonesia, goes over into Africa, kinds of different places. All right, with this one, we've got a let's see here. We got a little bit of, well, definitely in the Middle East, and again, when I say Islamic cities, I mean we're attaching the religion right to there, and so the importance, the influence of the Islamic faith is going to be big when it comes to the layout of these cities. Okay, a mosque, which is basically a house of worship, when it comes the equivalent to churches, to Christianity, that sort of thing. Yes, those are going to play an important part. If you look at the picture over here, you see that you have a mosque right here, the actual house of worship, and then you have these like tower-like structures that you see. Those are called minarets. And this is something that is very, very common to see in these Islamic cities. The minarets are towers that a lot of times there'll be, well, back in the old day, there'd be like people that would go up to the top. And at the various times of the day, they would call people to pray. One of those tenets of Islam that you stop what you're doing at various times during the day and you pray toward Mecca. All right. Nowadays, a lot of times these minarets actually have speaker systems now installed in them. And so they'll make some kind of a call, whether it's, an imam or some other kind of religious official who is making a call, for people to pray, that is now, projected over a speaker system, pre-recorded, that kind of a thing. Okay, but oftentimes that's what we're going to see in these Islamic cities is you're not going to so much see as far as the importance of a central business district as you're going to see the importance of that mosque. It not only is it, kind of like a religious center, it's also a gathering space. It's got cultural importance, it's got community importance, that sort of thing. All right. And if you look at my picture over here, and they're talking about, North Africa, where there's a lot of Islam's influence. There's elements of Eastern Africa where you see that Islamic influence. And this goes back to the days when merchants and traders coming from the Middle East were spreading throughout different parts of Africa and doing business with Africans. And alongside with doing that business, as we learned about, prior when we were learning about religion, oftentimes that's where you'd see that diffusion of different faiths going from one place to another. Africans were like, I've got my traditional faith, but this Islam thing sounds pretty good. I'm going to convert, that kind of idea going on. All right. Ooh, I'm watching the clock. I got to go fast. All right. Also with Islamic cities is this concept of the citadel city. All right. I think I kind of have it well explained for you there with number 2. These are cities that at one point way back in the day had to build, again, it's kind of almost that idea of walls and kind of structures to help protect the city. Kind of rough times back in those ancient days, and this was kind of for self-defense. And you still see a number, I'm not going to say all, but you'll still see a lot of Middle East cities that have some remnants of those citadels that still exist to this day, whether they've been purposefully preserved or whether they just remain all the same. Okay. But it's kind of, we're looking at those walled European cities. This is kind of like an echo of that. This is kind of a version of that. All right. Souks. All right. Open air markets will be kind of what I'm going to describe these as what some people call our bazaars. I don't mean like something bizarre, like it's weird, but a bazaar, Bazaar, is just that. It's a marketplace where people are buying, selling, and buying everything from food to clothing to handcraft. Might be leather goods. I mean, it's almost a lot of times it's everything you can imagine, and it's being sold in marketplaces like you see there on the right side in that picture. Okay, some of them are completely open air. Some of them, like this one, are kind of a very open space, but still, it's within a building kind of a space, or at least a space that's covered. A lot of the Middle East, very, very hot. All right, and so always kind of seeking that shade and ways that you can create that shade. And so the souks oftentimes are covered in some way or another, and usually not right there. Again, we're stepping away a little bit from so much of the idea of a traditional CBD, and these are a little bit further out beyond. Okay, these kind of get out in some of those. If I'm looking back up here, getting a little more out here in these areas here is where you're going to start, where you're going to see those souks. Okay, and then further on out is where you'll actually get into the residential areas of the Islamic cities where the people are going to live. And again, it's the same idea where a lot of times you don't have kind of like a front yard, backyard. A lot of the residences are built to kind of have almost more like a courtyard effect that can be covered over. A lot of like palms and trees that are in around there to create shade, and a lot of it's a reflection of the kind of lives they live in, the climate that they have to endure, given the geography of where they're at. Okay, all right, that'll get you that one taken care of. I think we'll have one more that we'll cover when we get back together, but I'm over my time, so I'm going to cut it short right there. Hope you got some good information, and see you on the flip side. Bye.